Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. The Durham Public School Board of Education work session is now in session. At this time, we wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to inform our parents, staff, and constituents about the work aligned with our mission to embrace, educate, and empower every student to innovate, serve, and lead. Tonight, the administration will be presenting information to keep you up to date on our strategic plan. The interpreters tonight are Martha Romo Erguiles and Marty Ramirez. Thank you for joining us tonight. First item on our agenda is the moment of silence. I'll just take a moment. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the agenda review and approval.
Move approval of the agenda as presented. Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Byer, who is joining us virtually. Second by Ms. Umstead. We will do a roll call, since one of our members is virtual. I'll start you, Ms. Byer. Ms. Byer?
Thank you. This is Natalie Byer. I vote aye.
Ms. Rogers?
No.
Ms. Valladares?
Aye.
Ms. Carter Alton? Aye. Ms. Chavez? Aye. Ms. Umstead?
Aye.
And I'm Johanna Lewis, and I vote aye as well. The agenda is reviewed and approved by 6 to 1. The next item on the agenda is our board work session minutes for May 4th. Can I get a motion to minutes?
Move approval of the minutes from May 4th work session.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Rogers, second by Ms. Byer. We'll take a vote. All in favor, Ms. Byer?
This is Natalie Byer. I vote aye.
Rogers?
Aye.
Valladares?
Aye.
Ms. Carter Alton?
Aye.
Ms. Chavez? Aye. Umstead?
Aye.
And Giovanni Lewis, I vote aye. It passes unanimously. And next we will have general public comment. A quick review of the rules. First, please state your name. If you're speaking for an organization, please state your name and the name of the organization. Second, speakers are asked to present their comments in 3 minutes. When the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute left to start winding up your remarks. When the red light comes on, it will beep, which indicates your time is up. Complaints about named staff, students, or parents should not be voiced in open session. However, we are very interested in hearing your concerns with regard to public education, safety of students, and to the operation of the school system. Finally, the board members will listen carefully and consider the comments, but we do not engage in discussion with the speakers. We have 3 speakers. Our first one is Nicholas Grabber Grace.
Good evening, members of the board. Good evening, staff. I hope everyone is well this evening. I am here tonight in 2 capacities. So first, I'm going to wear my parent hat that is not connected to any organization. And just thank the board and thank Ms. Giovanni for responding to a data request I recently sent regarding student safety and any potential correlation between student safety and the Smart Lunch program at Riverside. I know that when Smart Lunch was suspended for a period of time last year, many students raised serious concerns about the equity impact, the lack of access to programs, to opportunities and extracurricular activities, as well as tutoring. It is my understanding from interactions and conversations with my own child's friends and with staff that I have spoken with there that the Smart Lunch program is very popular and good for students and staff. And so I have concerns about the news that we have received from the school that the Smart Lunch program will not be continuing in this coming school year. So we will follow up more on that as I review that data. Taking off my parent hat, now I'm putting on my organizational hat. I am employed with the North Carolina Association of Educators, and one of my roles with NCAE is to serve as the North Carolina School Rescue Fund Coordinator for the National Education Association. So I work to track the expenditure of federal school recovery funds, ESSER, and ARP dollars across the state in different districts. I want to commend the district for really being on top of its ESSER and ARP plan. I know that Mr. Lester will be presenting this afternoon some of the details about the expenditure of the ESSER $2 that are set to expire in September and must be expended by January. I look forward to hearing the plan for that. Many districts are not as far ahead as Durham is in having a clear plan on how those dollars will finally be spent. The other thing I just want to ask the district to be thinking about, and I know that you are thinking about this to some degree, but in my work, I see a lot of opportunities in the funds from the federal government through the Inflation Reduction Act. These are not funds that are going directly to schools, but there are many green energy and environmental construction opportunities and grants that can be applied for, often in collaboration with county or municipal governments. And so as we're looking at school construction projects, I hope that the district is cognizant and aware of all of those opportunities, tracking those opportunities, and trying to find as many federal pots of money as we can to have green investments in the sustainable development and energy needs of our schools. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. And next we have Mercedes Montoya.
Good evening, everybody. There are board members and administration. My name is Mercedes Montoya. I'm part of the Foro de Padres, but also I'm a lead community who work with many of your staff, DPS staff, that are no students. I advocate for them because teachers are very important, but custodians, drivers, people who work at the kitchen need to be represented and need to be cared. I received some complaints from a couple of them. They complain, they come here to human resources because I always say you need to follow all the steps, the right steps. And they come here, but they feeling like they come to the courthouse, but with no results. They visit directly Mr. Jeff's office. And tonight I have a specific case that put my heart very sad. It's a custodian who works at Riverside. That person is a transgender person. And unfortunately, the lead suffer discrimination there many times. Even the lead custodian called that person for her birthday, for her birth name, instead to use the name she wanted. And she's a woman. She's feeling a woman. She needs to be respected. Now the solution is easy. Change the school. Change the school is like penalize people who suffer discrimination. It's like give a congratulations to the bullies. And this is not acceptable. And this is not the first time I come in. I visit. Tonight is the first time I hear with the board, but I visit Mr. Jeff's office in person to report many cases. And I have the same feelings like that particular custodian told me, feeling in the courthouse with no solutions, with nothing. Please take care all people, give the right value to the custodians because they work so hard. Some of them work like educators. Please take care them, take care our staff because many people quit because they don't feel in respect. Thank you so much for the opportunity tonight.
Yeah. Next we have Katie McGinnell. Please correct me if that was incorrect, the pronunciation.
It's McGonnell, Katie McGonnell. And I am here tonight representing myself, Little River School and the primary Montessori teachers across the district. First, I wanted to give an update, a quick Little River update since the last time I addressed this board in January of this year. During our July Little River SIL meeting, we reviewed our departing staff. We lost 20% of our K-5 teachers and 100% of our middle school teachers. In addition, from my kindergarten classroom alone, we lost 4 rising first grade families to Voyager, Excelsior, and Durham Academy. Little River lost one particular student, my daughter Elin, because she was robbed of her opportunity to complete her middle school tenure at Little River School, the only school she's known since kindergarten. All of these losses are directly related to the Growing Together initiative. I have chosen to stay at Little River because this board, the people at Fuller Street and Bacon Street, although you may direct our instruction, you are not responsible for the culture, the community, and the family that we have built at Little River. I am determined to keep this precious community alive during this transition and beyond. 2022, 2023, it's a closed chapter. It's water under the bridge. 23-24 begins in the next week. Thank you for bringing the training to our educators. Thank you for compensating us for our time and commitment to this rigorous Montessori program. It's greatly appreciated, but we need more. Last year, I brought it to the attention of this board and the Growing Together initiative that primary Montessori teachers were also required to be the EC case managers of their preschool students. I've been told that this issue is being addressed and we hope to find a resolution. This practice is a lawsuit waiting to happen. In order to even serve this population, the teacher in that role must have BK certification. I'm the only kindergarten teacher in our building with that certification at this moment. It is impossible for a general education teacher to execute an IEP to fidelity while meeting the needs of all of their students. It didn't used to be this way. It has just become this way. We need you to hold Bacon Street accountable for servicing their identified EC Montessori preschool students. And when they can't fund it, fund it. I look forward to working with y'all and watching you to continue to meet the needs of your staff and students by providing qualified EC teachers to serve in this role. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the end of our public comments. So then the next item on their agenda is the consent items. We have 4 items here, 6A, 6B, 6C, and 6D. We are given an opportunity to review these items before the board work session and have a chance to ask questions and get clarification, and it's been put on our consent agenda. I will accept a motion.
I move that we approve the consent items.
Second. Been moved by Ms. Umstead, second by Ms. Chavez. Is there any discussion? All in favor? We'll do a voice vote again. Ms. Byer,
This is Natalie Byer. I vote aye.
Rogers,
Aye.
Valladares,
Aye.
Ms. Carter Alta,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez. Aye. Ms. Umstead,
Aye.
and I also vote aye. It passes unanimously. The next agenda item is a Board of Education 7A resolution, Black and Hispanic Student Achievement Plan. I'll turn it over to Ms. Rogers. Ms. Rogers, did you want to table the conversation for another agenda item? I wasn't sure. I didn't ask for discussion earlier when we first made the motion. You had voted no. So I just want to give you an opportunity if you want to table it or if you wanted to move forward.
Everybody else agreed to keep it on the agenda, so I'm okay with it being on the agenda because that's a consensus of the board. I worked closely with Ms. Byer, Ms. Carter Otten to create this plan. And we probably worked on it for a month before we submitted it to administration and the rest of our colleagues on the board for feedback. And I have been waiting diligently for said feedback from the district. I finally got a meeting with Dr. Mbenga last week. Much appreciation. I feel strongly that we need to implement more deliverables more often so that we're making sure we're meeting the needs of Black and Hispanic students. I am open to a conversation about what that looks like, and look forward to hearing from my colleagues about what they want to see in such a plan and what the administration feels like is appropriate for them to produce and the timeline upon which they can produce that. But have heard some unreadiness from other colleagues today, and I am comfortable with delaying that for as long as it takes to bring the board and administration along.
And this agenda item is on for discussion, so the floor is open for discussion. Any questions, comments from other board members?
I'm happy to share. I appreciate you, Ms. Rogers, for working on this, spearheading this along with the other board members that worked with you. I think that it is really important as a district that has majority Black and brown students, Black and Hispanic students, to have a clear plan about how we are addressing achievement. I think that as I read through this, there are many ways that I see that it overlaps with our strategic plan. And I want us to consider maybe even where those alignments are so we can be really explicit about where that is in our plan. I really like the portions that talk about creating a family advisory council to have members of our community that help supporting us thinking about how do we address some of these students. I think that's really important. I have some questions about some of the metrics that are here and if those are the right ones or if they're metrics that we have currently that provide some of the similar information. And I think one more thing that I'll just add as a piece of feedback as I was reading through in our educational equity policy, we talk a lot about systemic racism and the impacts that has on our outcomes. And I would want to make sure that there's a line in the resolution that also addresses that piece as well. And so want to make sure that we acknowledge how that also plays a part in outcomes for our students. I think I'm happy to work on this more and have more dialogue. I know that there's been time where this has came out to us, but I think having more conversation as we finalize our strategic plan, we're starting this upcoming year. We'll have data back soon, academic achievement data as well, so we can continue this conversation. But I want to again thank you and appreciate you for putting this together, starting this work.
Thank you. And Ms. Byer, feel free to come off mute if you want to say anything.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lewis. I really appreciate it. You know, I can see part of you and can't see all of you, but thank you for accommodating me and letting me join you virtually. I was excited when I saw this back in June, just like I was excited when I suggested that we add the race equity scorecard for discussion, because I think it's so important for us to be explicit in this work about what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we're engaging the community. And so I guess I had given Ms. Rogers my feedback on this. I know that it had gone to administration for feedback. And I assumed when it came to the agenda that the administration was ready, had made any changes that they wanted, and we were ready to move forward with this. If there are others that feel like it needs modification, I look forward to expediting whatever staff needs and whatever staff believes are the right metrics to go ahead and continue to bring this work front and center. And for us to have regular transparency about the disparities that we know that exist, and ways that we are going to hold ourselves, our administrators, our educators, our community accountable. And I think some of those are in the strategic plan, but I think we need more than what is in the strategic plan, and we need a regular calendar of metrics moving forward. So I look forward to hopefully bringing this. I was excited about it starting our school year, our welcome back to 23, 24, like knowing that this is the focus of this board. So I look forward to maybe it being on the agenda in 2 weeks or in September, but I look forward to this board moving forward with an explicit focus that is additional to the strategic plan, because the strategic plan is one document, and this goes hand in hand, in my view, with that. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Ms. Valladares?
I want to thank my colleagues. I've been in conversation with pretty much, all three colleagues that worked and told me about the general intention behind this resolution. And then I stated, as many resolutions as we need. We have policies in place, we have the strategic plan, but I don't see an issue with highlighting areas that we really want to focus on. But I also understand our administration has been working really hard. And I second that maybe, whatever ways we can get the administration and our colleagues to just kind of talk about what makes sense, so it's not redundant with the strategic plan, and to honor the work that is already in hand. I mean, every time we bring resolutions, we want to honor like the work that has gotten us to this point. We're in the second strategic plan that we have. And I think that adding the strategic plan would be it. I was ready to support this just out of principle, in the sense that we continue to hear in the community ways that our families say, please support our most vulnerable students, right? Let's support the word intersectionality in here excited me, because there's a lot of work that we're doing, and we're not going to end that work of intersectionality. I mean, that is work that, as many policies as we have in place, as many strategic plans as we have in place, as many trained high quality teachers that we have and educators that we have in place, there's always going to be work for improvement. And I've said this in community conversations recently. I've said the work of equity is the work of improvement, and we're not shy in DPS to improve. And so out of principle, this is definitely something aligned with what I support. I also, I was ready to support it like this, but I would also say, let's acknowledge also that our chair, Bettina Umstead, and I worked diligently also in meeting with Isla, that also told us, hey, there's no resolutions that actually speak to immigrant students. And I mentioned this also to my colleague, and I think both of my colleagues and I was talking about this resolution, and how it's important to also like acknowledge, like, where are we not seeing as much language around the the populations, like our immigrant families, ESL, English as second language. So there is a resolution in place that has that. So I'm supportive of this resolution. I'm supportive of, whatever we need to do to make sure that it acknowledges strategic plan, the ESL resolution, anything else. But I think that there is a general sentiment in community that more work has to be done. And culture is shifting, and I'm excited about our recent board retreat. Dr. Mabenga, we're in the right direction with that board retreat. I said it there, I'm saying it now. I'm very proud of where we're moving. I think there's, again, more improvement to come. And in meeting with some of the administration also, that's been the sentiment, that this year we're more equipped than ever before, especially with socio-emotional learning, like implemented throughout the entire district, to actually make sure that we're being really receptive to the needs of families, especially culture, especially what does it mean to be like, to have well-being in schools. And so I'm excited about the work that administration is doing. I think that this is definitely not in conflict in any way. But if we can just get it to acknowledge that work that is on hand, and then definitely the information that is on here, I'm very supportive of just highlighting how important it is to keep an eye and support our Black and Hispanic students. The other thing I'll say about Hispanic is that there is no consensus about Hispanic, Latinx, Latine. We will go to war and we will never win. And so I also know that that is also work. My colleagues have been really receptive in terms of wanting to have those conversations with community. Some people are going to say, yes, use Hispanic. Some people say, yes, use Latina, Latino, Latine, Latinx. There's no consensus, but I think people understand the general sentiment of this, that in theory, we're talking about a population that has a culture, language, and we're not ascribing to the technical definition of Hispanic, because that would really get us in a whole complex thing, right? What is, Hispanic is based on language only, and we have families that are indigenous, that speak indigenous languages. So we're in the work of improvement. Nothing's going to be 100%, but the intention is what is important for everybody to understand the intention of supporting all our students and making sure that we lift them all up. Thank you.
Ms. Carter Alto, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm super excited about this and it feels like something that this board and this district should be behind. I'm really excited about the Family Advisory Council, and I think that that builds on, that's something additional that this would provide that we don't really have in our strategic plan. And the Family Advisory Council, I think, should be involved in the development of the plan as stated in the resolution to make sure that those that it reflects the experiences and the wisdom of our community members that it will most directly impact, but not just the development of the plan, but the continual monitoring and progress updates. I think that they should be able to weigh in on that and be involved throughout the process. That's exciting to me. The more frequent updates on how we're doing is exciting. And also just a really transparent, intentional dedication of resources to those students and families that need them most. And again, as my colleagues have said, to build on the great work we're already doing and to continue to dedicate all of our resources to those who need them. And I've been digging around across the country at other districts that are doing this type of work. The most notable is I'm still looking and trying to find some really good examples that we could work from and pull what's relevant for us. But Los Angeles Unified School District, while much larger than us, I think is an interesting example because they already have preliminary data that indicates that they have reductions in suspensions. They already have increased graduation rates and really importantly, more engagement of Black students and families across the district. One thing that's been interesting and what I've been looking at though is that most plans across the country are either focused on Black or Hispanic and or Indigenous families and students. So I think this is a way for us to continue to be really innovative as a district. I think we'll have to think through how we make that type of thing work without an example to work off of, but we would be serving as a model then for what other parts of the country could do. Again, to just really show that this is a really strong focus for us. And I agree with other comments that we need to make sure, of course, that this integrates with what we're doing in our strategic plan, but also with our Office of Equity Affairs, for example, and all of the work there. We don't want to be redundant. We don't want to create extra work. We just want to make sure that we're doing the best we can for our students.
Thank you. Stop it.
Thank you, all of you and Ms. Rogers for bringing this forward. I think it opens a very important conversation. So in thinking about the purpose of this and the goals, let's see. I think that one of the biggest things is being able to name the strategies that we're using to improve outcomes for Black and Hispanic students. And I think that a number of them are listed in the strategic plan, but this further sort of highlights and illuminates what we're doing, as well as to bring out the fact that our equity work is really beyond the Office of Equity Affairs, and it's embedded in everything that we do. And I am also wondering and thinking about it more at this point, if it might be something, I'm wondering how it could inform policy going forward, how the information that's brought back to us might, what we might do with that. So that's kind of a question that I have is that part of the goal of this? I'd be interested to hear what other people think. And so beyond that, I think I also like the Family Advisory Council and the community being involved in that way. I'm wondering Dr. Mubanga, if I can ask what feels, or what about this? To you, are things that we're already doing, and what is wanted, what within this is most, new and shifts our work?
I'll be glad to make my comments once every board members
Okay.
intervene. So I'll make my I'll give you my 2 cents.
Okay. I think I'll stop there, and I want to hear what other folks think too.
All right, I will round us off so we can hear Dr. Mabanga's 2 cents. Getting to that. First of all, thank you to the team who brought this together, began working on this back in June. What a way to start this year. I echo the sentiments of Ms. Valladares. Our board retreat and the work of our administration was outstanding. It was really good to hear from a bird's eye view, where we are, where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And to start off this year, knowing our board priorities with this document is exciting. So I'm excited to be in this discussion. I appreciate you, Ms. Rogers. You sent me a podcast with AJ Crabbill. And as I listened to that really helped me to see what I was looking at, apples for apples. And I said this to you, how this can complement our strategic plan and the way it can add the metric pieces of it. So again, this is something that I think we're gonna use as our North Star for this year in this resolution as we, fine tune it and make it what we really need it to be, right? So first, just a few points I'm gonna make and keep us moving, but it does say in the document 2022, and I did want to make sure we're specifying it's the 21-22 school year, because we will be getting data for the 22-23 school year. So just specifying what time frame that accomplishes, right? We are going to get our updated data in September. So I think it's important to have that information also, so we're looking at this from a full perspective and a full context. It says something about someone being connected to DPS. I want to make sure we have strong language that they attend DPS. We don't want adjunct folks coming in, informing our resolution and plans with the Family Advisory Council. And I am excited about the Family Advisory Council as well. I did question, and one just put this for the record, how many people are going to be on this council? I'm glad there's intentionality around the council. I know that we currently have a parent advisory council, and there's one parent from each of our Title I schools. So I'd love to, again, not recreate the wheel, but to build on what we already have. So looking at some of those factors as the Family Advisory Council is being formed. I wanted also, I am concerned about the December 2023 turnaround for these recommendations. As we know, engaging folks to be authentic in our engagement, we want to give time, we want to give that intentionality, we want to make sure we have a well-rounded advisory council. So how much time would that be? I don't want to put in a resolution something so strict that we can't even keep our own commitments that we're making. So let's maybe look at that. And as Chair Umstead shared, this achievement plan is very much in line with our strategic plan. And when I look at on page 2, some of the bullets there, I see goals 1B, 2B, 3C. There's talk around conflict resolution. I think about our restorative practices. So a lot of good stuff is there. I would like to really take some time and look at that section in particular and align that with the board priorities that we identified at the retreat. So if we're being very intentional, have this as our North Star, to me, that would be most useful instead of having bits and pieces from different parts of the plan. So what we've already decided, like, this is what we're going to make sure we're focusing on. And then the last thing, the metrics that are listed, I want to make sure that we're really clear about the how and the when, because some of those metrics are only captured at the end of the year. So to have quarterly reportings, we'll have the same numbers being reported. So that's just a fine detail that I saw as well. It definitely feels like to get these metrics, we're relying on data being pulled and also testing to happen. And that is our value for this testing to happen to get these metrics. I want to make sure we're going to do it in a way that is most efficient. So again, I like the so many aspects of this to be a complement to what we've already been doing in our strategic plan and the work you've done. I think that again, the 2021-22 school year gives us a snapshot view coming right out of the pandemic. I look forward to the administrator's report with our full perspective of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going, and how we compare with other districts. I love to learn from other districts and what they're doing. But be clear, we heard this in our retreat. People are learning from us. We are leading the way in the efforts and things that we're doing, and I want to make sure we continue to do that as well. I know when so last thing I'm gonna say, our strategic plan, we talk about where we are in the plan, the process, where we're going and what's already been completed. I just think that's where we're gonna add those metrics to really be specific in what this board is looking for. So I look forward to continue working on this. And it's been a short turnaround. So let's give it some time and let's do this right. Thank you. Dr. Mbanga, you have 2 cents.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lewis, and thank you to all our board members. What really gives me joy that I get the message loud and clear. The focus for our board is really student achievement. That's really give me joy. That's the work that we've been doing. Again, I think board members, Valladares said it really well. We are in continuous improvement business. We're never gonna get to 100%. Even when we get there, there are gonna be another targets there. As I'm making my comments, I really want folks to acknowledge, and especially the one that's watching us, we made a lot of progress. There are a lot of districts when it comes to equity, and the way even we're moving our minority students, other superintendent will tell you, they wanna learn from us. So with this, the way I look at this is an addition to what we are doing. And if it's the pleasure of the board, just a good couple of weeks, give us a little bit of time to be able to align what we have in the strategic plan and what this is bringing. I really would like to make sure that when you guys sign off this, you're gonna hold the superintendent accountable. I wanna make sure if you ask him for something on a quarterly basis, when it comes to student achievement, I'll tell you, I only have ready data. I have all this viewable data. So which is not going to be really meaningful to be able to present to you at that point. So with those differences, we can really reconcile those differences in a matter of a few weeks. Let's look at what we have in a strategic plan. If you guys want to go and move forward with these resolutions, make sure that everything is pretty much compatible. And then it's not something that we just creating more work, because we have to work really smarter to make sure that we're delivering for our students. I'm really in agreement. This is a good addition, a good focus for us. But if we say a good 2 weeks or 3, make sure that we make sure there's alignment. And then when it comes to reporting of data, we have enough to be able to report on a quarterly basis, because I don't want our family council to be around the table and say, we are waiting for this at the end of this quarter. What do you have? If we say everything is embargo, we don't have anything specific, then they say this was approved by the board. This is a resolution. So I'm in agreement. I met with board member Rogers. We're able to have a really robust, good conversation. But I think a matter of a couple or 2 weeks, he's gonna get all of us really in a good place, so we can make a really clear alignment to what we're gonna present for you guys to make it a resolution.
Ms. Carter, I'll tell you another comment.
I had forgotten to say something earlier that's relevant based on the last couple of comments, and that is, I think it's important that the quarterly metrics, when possible, are not the same necessarily as the annual metrics they're predictive of, right? Because we want to know, and that won't always be possible, as you're saying, but where we have something that's an indication that we're moving towards that goal, we want to see, are we moving in the goal, or are we starting to move in the other direction? And the purpose of that being, so staff and we and the public all see, all right, we're moving in the right direction, good, let's keep going, versus things are not looking good, let's shift gears, right? But again, not the same metrics, but those that are predictive of what our annual will be.
I agree. Let's give an example about discipline reports. When students come back at the beginning of the year, as they're transitioning from elementary to middle to high school, you can see a peak with discipline because they're trying to learn the environment and the things of that nature. Once they settle, those discipline data may start going down. So whatever we're gonna present to you or to the group may be misleading because you have to capture a good year to know, because there are some time, I'll give you probably October. When it comes to discipline reports, it's always up around that time. So you're not gonna make really good assessment or good judgment based on 3 months. And when it comes to achievement, it's going to be most of the tools that we use. They are pretty much diagnostic data, things of that nature. From that point, this is where those students are. Now let's set up some goals. How are we gonna be able to move them along? I'm in agreement to be really laser focused when it comes to this data, but I think just a few more weeks for us to really see what are we really gonna put there in place so that you guys gonna be able to hold me accountable. I don't wanna come in front of the family council, not really having something concrete to present to them.
Ms. Umstead.
Yeah, I think too, what I'm also hearing, there's a tension of like, we know that schools are reviewing their data on a regular basis, right? So instructional coaches, teachers, principals are looking pretty regularly to see what is shifting and changing. Okay, we noticed this trend. What are we doing to do differently and within our school context? And I wonder, and as we talk about this more, we got 52 schools. So how do we lift up some of maybe the highlights from that or overall trends that come versus data for all of kind of everyone? I think that might get us, because people work is so dynamic, we might be chasing in lots of different directions throughout the year versus looking at more kind of trends and people who are in the building being able to say, here are some couple highlights from our data. This is what we're working on. It might give us a little bit of a better picture. Because I think data is informative, but the context around it always also matters. And I think if we do too regularly with all the different schools, we really like things shift and change so much. I don't know if that comment makes sense, but I think we should think about the consistency and what we're seeing to make sure that we're helping people move forward versus kind of sending our schools in a lot of different directions.
And Miss, no, you were fine. Ms. Rogers.
Thanks, everybody, for your feedback and everything. I am appreciative of it, and I look forward to whatever administration and the board comes up with in terms of supporting Black and Hispanic students and immigrant students. And I look forward to supporting that. I want to remind us that there is urgency. We've been asking for this for a while. We've been looking for this. The community has been looking for this. We moved swiftly on the LGBTQIA task force and the policy, and that there's a sense of same sense of urgency for Black and Hispanic students within our district. And that we all feel that, and I know that we feel that, but like we have to keep pushing. So, thanks.
And we definitely will keep pushing. And like I said, I think this is definitely a complement to the strategic plan, and we'll continue to center the majority minority district that we have, 80% Black and Hispanic. So I think we're on the right track, and I'm glad to hear this discussion. And I laugh and chuckle when you talk about discipline in sixth graders, because you all know I have a 10th grader, an 8th grader, and a 5th grader. So when we talk about childhood development, I feel like I'm in the throes of it. And I see things repeating itself from when my oldest was in 5th to now being as, so there's things that does ebb and flow. So I appreciate that perspective. And I just chuckle at my own situation. And the last thing I want to lift up is a article. I've been in conversation with Southern Education Foundation, and they have an article called Economic Vitality and Education in the South. I will send it to you all. And anyone in public who wants, just email me. But it's something that really talks about policy levers, and there's language in here too that I think we can add to this resolution to make it strong. Ms. Valladares.
Here for tonight, Giovanni Lewis. Risk ratios, something that is mentioned in this resolution. That's something that, first of all, I want to thank our administration, including Dr. Pittman and also Dr. Ali Royster, working to make sure that that data is accessible to community. How many times I've talked to community members who are like, we want to see the data on suspensions. Oh, here, I'm getting it closer. And I can pinpoint them to the website and say, here's the data, and it's, you can definitely clearly see the trends over the years. But the concept of risk ratios, something that is mentioned as a resolution and is something that we can continue to talk about. In what ways, how does the district interpret the risk? And that is a good question. And it may take us a little bit of time to decide, like, how do we prevent, students becoming affected, by disenfranchisement. What are school to prison pipeline dynamics? We've talked about this endlessly. We talk about this all the time. And so that is definitely something that I know our administration is working on with the data that is there, and the data that will be forthcoming and will be shared with community that, we look forward to sharing with community. But those risk ratios are definitely something that I think I appreciate that being in this resolution. It's very important for us to be as proactive as possible and kind of think about some of the, again, intersectionality, the things that are lifted in this resolution that I think I'd like to continue to see in whatever ways. And I know you're going to have that conversation about what makes sense to include. In what ways do we frame that we're taking a forward look into preventing our students, preventing harm to students, or the kind of things that lead them to risks, right? And so I just wanted to just highlight that little piece. And the other thing is, as I think about the conversations about restorative practices and some of the other work that is happening, that is also very important work. And I know that there's a lot that is here about student achievement that also hinges on, the work that we're doing with restorative practices and all that. So I know that that's part of our strategic plan. And it's important that the community just knows that, this is work that is encompassing everything from, like, how clean our buildings are. And I appreciate our custodial services, keeping our schools clean, making sure that kids can show up and have a clean environment by which they can learn. I applaud the work of so many custodians who work day in and day out to do that. And so student achievement hinges on everything, right? On everything that we do in that strategic plan. And I just want to thank our administration for that, and also thank our board for thinking about risk and ways that we can lower that risk.
Thank you. And to close out our discussion, Ms. Byer has a comment. You want to close us out, Ms. Byer?
Thank you so much, Ms. Lewis. It's hard to not be there with you all because I just miss y'all so much. But I do want to say I've been able to, one of the benefits of Zoom is just listening to all the wisdom that is in everyone's comments, all the suggestions, all the feedback. And to me, that's what makes this work better, right? But I did hear Ms. Rogers, highlight the need for urgency, and I know we all feel that as well. And I wondered if in the room today, y'all might feel, I heard Dr. Mavinga said, he needs some weeks, but he didn't say months. So September, Dr. Mavinga, would that be a time that you would be comfortable after working with your staff to bring this back with edits? I think Ms. Rogers has always welcomed edits from all of us, but would that be a timeline that might work for the next steps on this?
Yeah, September, I think it will work. But I think we got a couple opportunities there in September. It can be a work session, or it can be a regular board meeting as well. So if you guys can give us till the end of the month in September, I think that will be helpful.
Chair Umstead.
All right, if I could propose that we work on edits, and that at the work session in September, we bring a final draft that could be either approved then or moved to the big work session if we need any additional edits. But I think getting that done, that gives us a month. I think we can make that happen. Time for the administration to look. I'm also happy, since I had questions, to work with whether it be Ms. Rogers or whether Dr. Mavinga and staff to help answer my questions on this in the next couple of weeks. So again, thank you for working on this. I'm excited. I think equity is all about being explicit about what you're doing to support student groups. And we know, especially our Black and Hispanic, Latinx, Latine community, and those boys, like, we know that there are areas that we can work on. And I think even academics is here, but it's also clear to me that thinking about the social and emotional community, how do they find community in school, right? So that they're so connected with what's happening in that building that students are not thinking about some of the things that might be more attractive outside of school to them. So I think about this in so many different ways, and I think it's really urgent and important. I'm happy to work with folks to make it happen.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind, since this is initiative that came from the board, I will ask for Ms. Rogers, as well as probably one other board members to be able to join me with probably a couple of my team members. I'll say just on top of my head, Dr. Stewart, Dr. Pittman, and Dr. Royster, because he's the one, the guardian of all the data. So if we can do that, and we'll quickly set up a couple meetings, hopefully we'll be in a good place by the time we come back.
Excellent. Look at this working board. So the next item on the agenda, that's the end of that discussion. I'm sure all hearts and minds are clear. All right, next item on the agenda is agenda number 8, Chief of Staff, Policy 7503, teleworking. Ms. Giovanni.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Mabanga, and Chair Lewis. If I could get the teleworking PowerPoint pulled up. While we're waiting on that, I want to state that, what precipitated this was, the struggles that we were experiencing and they're experiencing around the country with staffing in school systems around North Carolina and the country. And so as we thought about it and got feedback from staff members and employees and even some board members, there was some conversation around exploring the teleworking process. As you know, that everyone was kind of doing teleworking during COVID, but we did not have a formal policy that we had adopted in Durham. Several other districts had adopted one, but Durham had not. And so we worked on it for several months and got feedback from various people, including board members, and we are now ready to present for a first reading, Policy 7503, teleworking. Next slide, please. Next slide. So it's a fairly dense policy. There's also attached to it for your review that is posted in board docs, a regulations and procedures, which are also very dense. What is not included in there, because we were waiting for the board's feedback from the board, would be additional processes that HR and or potentially finance would draft and create so that it would be hosted on the website so that if there ultimately is teleworking positions, it would be clear and on the website. So given the density of it, it would be very difficult to kind of get into that. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look at it. But with that being said, there is still the expectation that work would happen at a DPS site. So teleworking continues to be kind of the exception because we can't provide instruction remotely. And so when we talked with several board members, there was a lot, of recognition that in supporting teaching and learning and our teachers in the schools, our default is that we be present to provide that support to our teachers. But as I indicated at the beginning, when we are trying to recruit for certain positions, including some that are very difficult to staff, for example, IT positions, it is important that it is important to administration that we request from the board that this be placed in the policy, the option to designate certain positions as permanent or full-time, not permanent, none of them were ever permanent, as full-time teleworking positions. Next slide, please. We also have, if you go through the policy, and again, it's very dense, so I'm not going to go through it. There's various divisions for it. There's teleworking for teachers on unprotected work days, potential teleworking for teachers on non-instructional days, et cetera. So just laying that out and sharing with teachers when we're recruiting for them, letting them know that those are some possibilities that the board does support, with the approval and working with principals and supervisors. And as I indicated previously, the regulations and procedures are in here. Those are issued by the superintendent. So, but they are here for the board's review to kind of see where administration is looking. And we will be having some teleworking agreement documents drafted by HR that would be posted on the website. So this policy is on for first reading, and I am happy to take any questions.
Ms. Valladares.
Thank you so much. Soon to be Dr. Giovanni. I am, this is one of those topics that, I think very important based on on after the pandemic, the time that we're in. There was like the great resignation right after the pandemic. And then also who I've heard from about this policy are folks who sometimes have to go to multi-sites. And you mentioned IT as an example, but there's also interpreters, that work in the evenings and they have to come to this building or they might have to go to another building. And so they're having to go to multiple locations sometimes based on open houses. I'm pretty sure that, the Multilingual Resource Center, it's working nonstop, right? And there's a whole lot of work that is happening even after hours, even like in the evenings, up until the evenings. And so the question is, while I understand the sentiment of we still have to be accountable and we want to make sure that there's a DPS site, what do you envision specifically for those positions that, just like IT, they don't have to be in any particular school building, but I guess the question is, do we have flexibility about people working from home specifically versus a DPS site?
Yeah, so the policy, the draft policy does indicate that positions that could potentially be, or qualify for potentially full-time telework or even hybrid telework would go through a process with a leadership team. So there would be kind of, we love our task forces and committees. So a task force or kind of the superintendent would appoint various staff members to that. And then those positions would be vetted by those staff members. But I think the biggest piece of it is that if you look at the policy, we put a lot of, we kind of the board kind of sets the stage of where it wants equity, it wants flexibility, it wants fairness, but it also wants to make sure that the needs of the school system are being met, right, at the policy level. But in the regulations and procedures and potentially in the processes that we will draft, there is also that flexibility for principals and supervisors to say, this person, this job, these are the essential job functions and they can be performed, remotely 2 or 3 days. That's kind of the expectation that's in the policy as well. I mean, there's a lot in there, so I couldn't really go through it, but that's kind of the expectation, even when you're talking about, kind of the hybrid telework is 2 to 3 days a week, right? That you may work remotely. So there is a lot of flexibility to make sure that, again, supervisors and principals have the bodies that they need, the employees and staff to get the work done. So there is that flexibility there.
Yeah, that flexibility is important. I guess the other thing is that we talked about hard to fill positions. But sometimes we have like limited positions. Like there's also that reality that, it's not that we would probably have triple the amount of interpreters, but we have very limited spots in terms of like, how many interpreter positions we have. And I think that's just the other thing that hard to fill / I don't know what the wording would be, increased capabilities for those kind of positions, that are not as abundant, I would say, and hopefully we can add more positions. I know that we've added quite a few, and I think this administration for adding more interpreters. There's always a need for more, but I think this is a good thing, and I thank you for working on it. Thank you.
I really appreciate this. I think this is, keeps us on pace with the rest of our society, right? It also is respectful of employees. We entrust folks to do their work because they're professionals and to do it well, regardless of where they are. So I love that. I think teleworking, this is the future. So I like this policy and I really appreciate the time spent with all the details. I really appreciate the, eligibility for discretionary telework, including extenuating circumstances like caregiving for a minor child or other family member. I think this is really important provision to support our largely female workforce, who are often caregivers. And yes, I think this is great. Those are my main comments.
Ms. Chavez.
Thank you. I think this is also very practical and I think it's important to be flexible and try and retain and recruit our a great, workforce. I have one question, which is I was wondering if there are any limits, such as working outside the US. I know that there are guidelines for that at some organizations, and I just wanted to see if that was a regulation or if there were any other kind of limitations that we're implementing that weren't mentioned in here along those lines.
I don't believe that there is any mention in the policy, so I would, we've actually, what I would say, I'm happy to come back and take a look at that and make sure. I don't think anybody's doing that. We did have some conversations even around out of state because we want to make sure that we are compliant, because if a person's working in North Dakota, right, instead of North Carolina, they may have different rules around, workers' compensation, et cetera. And so we are very cognizant on that aspect, but I will, if you would allow me, when we bring it back, I'm happy to provide a definitive answer.
I would like to add as well, I think we had a situation during COVID, a person was out of the country. I think we're gonna work with our attorneys as we're working on these procedures to strengthen that so that we will be legally compliant.
I think that's important because I know out of state, out of country, there's going to be different regulations, tax, all that kind of thing. The other question I have, I think I'm really excited about this policy. I think it makes a lot of sense. My question is, I think a concern that might come up is that some people have more options to telework than others, or et cetera. And wondering when people have those types of concerns, where do they go to report that? And I didn't see that in the rules and regulations, but I just want to be clear that I could see that coming up. And I have concerns around being denied telework or something like that. Where should that go?
So I believe it's very kind of in the RMP a little bit that they can reach out to the HR department when they're asking for that. So if it's not in there, that's a given anyway. That's when someone has concerns that they are being discriminated against in their employment in any way, they would reach out to the HR department.
Thank you. That was my only question. I'm excited about this, but I could see people feeling like, oh, someone got more than me or something like that. So how do we make sure we keep it equitable across the board?
And I think that's what it's going to be important to have that team, right? So that it's not just, Dr. Pittman saying, oh, this person can work remotely, and then Tanya saying, no, you can't. So we want to make sure that we are, equitable in this. And so I think that team that's set forth in there, and obviously, like all policies and regulations, we want to make sure that we are responsive. And when we get feedback that maybe we need to tweak it, I'm always, that person. I know Dr. Mabanga is as well, that maybe we need to make any adjustments, but we felt like this is definitely a good start for us to launch a teleworking policy in Durham Public Schools.
Fire, did you have any comments or discussion points?
No, thank you. I appreciate all the modifications that Ms. Giovanni made when we discussed this policy, and look forward to it being used on a very limited basis and being clear about how important it is to be in person whenever possible, including in the Fuller building. I think that's important as well. Thank y'all.
And then my only question, just as follow up with, when you find out the legalities around out of state and out of country, will that be added to this policy, that language?
I think it depends on what we find out, right? If it's appropriate and needs to be in the policy, we would. But as Dr. Mabanga said, we work closely with Mr. Malone, and he represents multiple districts. And so we'll definitely bring what we believe is the best for Durham Public Schools, because I like to Durhamize everything. So, okay.
Well, thank you. This is on for discussion as a first reading.
That's correct.
If there's no other comments or discussion, we'll move to the next agenda item. 8B, Policy 1710, prohibition against discrimination, harassment, and bullying.
We could pull up the PowerPoint for Policy 1710. All right. Next slide, please. Next slide. So Policy 1710 is what precipitated this, and this shouldn't take too long for us, but did want to make sure that we were sharing it publicly so that folks can understand. Again, like I said at the last presentation, policies are living, breathing things. And when we start to see, or someone brings it to my attention or the attention of anybody on cabinet or a board member, and they reach out to me, we want to make sure that we are responsive to the changes. And so what you see here is the proposed draft language that we're asking the board to change, and we are asking the board to waive second read on this policy this evening. But what we are doing is adding to our bases for discrimination of protected classes is sexual orientation and gender identity. We changed he or she to they, just so that we, just making sure that can encompass everyone, because that's what we're about in Durham, is everyone belongs and should feel welcomed. We added a cross-reference to the LGBTQIA plus gender supports policy in the later in the cross-references. Next slide, please. And the other change that we are doing is Karen Beckett was our Title IX coordinator for all Title IX incidents. And it was a lot for her, for one person. So we also are requesting that Title IX be split out between students remaining with Karen Beckett and employees going with Jeff Coweek. Jeff is in HR and does employee relations. And so they were kind of trying to tag team those. And a lot of times when you have employee situations, they are very, very sensitive, and it could sometimes slow it down with Ms. Beckett. And so we spoke with HR, and I think everyone is in agreement that the best, most efficient way to handle Title IX claims with employees is for those to be pulled out and go to Jeff Coweek, and Ms. Beckett would retain student Title IX. So we are, that's our recommendation. The other one, I don't think we had updated the policy for Section 504 previously. That was Dr. Judd Manning in the policy. So that position was changed, and it's now Dr. Melissa Watson. And so we do have to get the board's approval to update what has actually happened. Next slide, please. And those are the proposed changes that we are asking the board to make, and waive second reading if the board is comfortable. If you're not, it's not the end of the world. We can happily bring it back for a second reading at the board meeting.
All right, thank you, Ms. Carter Alto. And then Ms. Rogers.
Thank you. This looks good. I was curious, I just have a few questions. I was curious to know if there's a reason that we don't also have language and religion added to that list. I don't know if you pull up the running list again or I'll pull it up. The one that we're adding sexual orientation and gender identity to, it doesn't currently include language or religion, and these are included in the list enforced by the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. So they seem like important sections to also explicitly include and protect our students and our employees. But is there a reason we don't have them in there?
So it is in the full policy. If you go down under definitions, like it describes discrimination, and it does include race, ethnicity, sex, pregnancy, religion. We just typically, in just kind of the way this policy has kind of evolved, it hasn't included the full list. But sometimes when there are situations, things that you kind of have to lift up a little bit more, that is why those were added. But if it's a board pleasure, I'm more than happy. I'm not fighting against it. I was just answering your question as to why it wasn't in there. It's not that those are less than, it's just that traditionally they have been a little more limited in that first paragraph. But I'm happy to add it if that's the board pleasure, to add the full list of all of the protected classes.
Is there a difference in are there implications for, I mean, these are also federally protected.
That's accurate.
I don't know.
No, there's no implications. It really is. That first paragraph is kind of the board, kind of the introductory language from the board, and kind of given what, where we are in Durham and what we are seeing in our community, just wanted to make sure that that was clearly included as a as a protected class or a protected descriptor in Durham Public Schools. So it's just a kind of an art, not really. So the short answer is no. I don't really know how to do short answers, but I just did.
Me neither. My second question is, maybe I'm just not understanding this, but what is the clause about providing equal access to the Boy Scouts and other designated youth groups?
That's a North Carolina statute that requires that.
I'm actually not sure why it appears here in the policy. I looked at this, the School Board Association form, and I actually pulled up another one during the meeting here a minute ago to see if it reads that way, and it is just the way that the School Board Association places it. It is a statutory requirement that they be provided access. It is a little strange in my mind, but this is their form.
Mr. Malone, this is Natalie Byer, sorry. Is it true that I don't think the Boy Scouts are even called the Boy Scouts anymore? I think they changed their name to just be Scouts, didn't they?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can certainly look into that.
Ms. Valladares, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, call Ms. Rogers and then Ms. Valladares. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Rogers.
I have two questions. My first question is, and maybe you can speak to this, Ms. Giovanni, or maybe Dr. Mabanga, but it says the superintendent has appointed the following individuals. And so are we appointing, do we revise policy every time individuals turn over? Or is there a reason that we're not just naming those specific titles so that no matter who is in that role, we don't have to change policy every time?
So we frequently, we don't change them very frequently. I will say that. It's not very often, but what has been shared with me with OCR is that it is required that people have an actual person that they can reach out to versus, locate the Title IX coordinator, and then they would try to email whoever in Durham. So this way they get an actual email and actual direct contact. So, I mean, it is, it seems, odd that you would have that, but that is my understanding. Did I answer your question, Ms. Rogers?
You did answer my question. And I'd like to sit with this for a little while. So I'm asking y'all, can we sit with it if it's not urgent till next week? Because I'm thinking about the other implications when we have turnovers in guidance counselors and turnover in admin. Parents don't have that same ability to reach out to the right person. And I get that this is a little different legally, but I need to sit with that for a little while.
If it's okay with the board, I am happy to withdraw my request that y'all waive second reading. So if that's, because it's not urgent.
We just don't have to act on it and just use it as a discussion in first reading. Ms. Valladares.
Thank you. This is very nuanced work, right? The work of people's rights, it's very nuanced work. And, I think that, following the question of my colleague, when it comes to the role, I've always just wondered whether we as a district want to invest in some kind of arbiter, like some kind of like second mentioned person. So you have, for example, our admins that are listed on there as they're the designees, but then you have a backup, you have another option where there is another person. And I know that, this is work that our district has done in the past where we're really good about, like, if you're not, satisfied with this and you want to kind of, what is that word, move up the chain, escalate, right? Or you want to have like a second opinion. Do we have that capability of having an arbiter or a second designee that is like kind of like over the rules in this case?
Making sure I understand your question. So with regard to who your designated Title IX coordinator is and who your designated coordinators are for the purpose of federal discrimination
Yes.
laws, I would have to look into that. I don't see that as being, I would just have to look into it just to make sure, because I think what they don't want is that there'd be confusion, right? As to
Who to
like
go to.
who is ultimately responsible. Like somebody has to be finally accountable for complying with these federal laws. What I will say is I feel like there's definitely open doors with other people. So just using Title IX, right, which is with me, if someone is displeased with something that a Title IX investigator has done, because I'm completely objective, like I'm not involved in the investigations, I'm not involved in the decision making. So I really oversee like the facilitating it to make sure that they are complying with the law on for example, with Title IX. If someone is not happy with that, I've had multiple, not a lot, but more than one, less than 10 people who have reached out to me, with some concerns or questions or sometimes displeasure with that. And I will frequently let them know that they can reach out to the superintendent's office if they have an additional concern, and then Dr. Mabanga, because as his purview, could then assign it to anyone else that he would so select. So I think that it's really about, in Durham, it has been my experience, and I know I'm always sharing, grievance policies with people and complaint procedures with folks to make sure that they know that their voice, it can be heard. So I feel like that what your concern is being met, but I'm happy to kind of think that through a little further to see if it needs to be codified, and maybe take a look and see if any other districts have kind of codified outside of that, to make sure that maybe some people aren't as comfortable, if like Miss Giovanni said, no, she said I could go to the superintendent, but he may not listen. So let me think that through if you don't mind. And I'm
Yeah,
happy to bring that back when we come back for the board meeting to kind of talk it through some more.
I think even what you just said right now, I do see that happen in the district quite a bit. As many folks as, we start, with somebody who's the designee, and sometimes that work moves to somebody else. It includes somebody else. And, that's a practice that we have in DPS. I'm just wondering how we can kind of exemplify that the buck doesn't stop here, in the sense, in any ways that we can say, these are the designees. They're folks who have a background. Some of them have a background in law. They know the laws, and they're able to, do this work. And that's why they're the designees. They're the best folks to do this work. However, in the cases of grievances, sometimes there are differences. Sometimes there's, issues that families have, and they want to know, who else can I go to? And I think in this district, just even codifying that in terms of like, there's also the office of the superintendent is also definitely involved in this work in some ways.
The appeals process is clear for all of these, right? If you're not happy with what the decision maker stated, there is a process to appeal that. But I think what I'm hearing from you is kind of maybe on a more informal sometimes, but maybe people aren't necessarily displeased with one thing, but maybe a less formal piece. So I can think that through a little bit more. Is that, am I getting?
Yes, we can
Okay.
talk about it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Any other discussion?
All right, just one question, and a comment. Thank you for working on this. Thank you for updating it, and adding in gender identity and sexual orientation. I wanted to say, to Ms. Carter Otten's point, if we wanted to add language, I would just say, and I'm a words person, but gender identity, religion, language, legal status, or other aspects of identity or affiliation. Perhaps we could just change that sentence right there and capture a lot of the big categories of identity. Beyond that, I just wanted to ask this question about Title IX. Because women are the gender group most likely to experience sex discrimination, or maybe most commonly have complaints of it. Is there access to a female identified person for Title IX complaints if someone, or is that not something that perhaps like legally we would need to, is that something that we might want to provide if someone wants to bring a Title IX complaint forward?
I would like to respond, then Tanya Giovanni, you can jump in as well. So if co-week is the person in HR, then there's another level. There's a person there that's listening, that's collaboratively work with co-week as well to look into those cases. So if we're looking at opposite sex there, I think Dr. Listen has been collaboratively working with Jeff Cowick. There were some cases that were really hard and that she has to be involved as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know if this, I don't think this needs to be written in policy, but maybe it's just made clear as people reach out to Mr. Cowick that if they would like to request a female to attend a meeting, then that is like something that they can do. Cause I know that they work closely together and she'll collaborate, but I could see some people wanting even in an initial meeting, for there to be a female present or someone else present in that meeting. Second, I just wanted to come back to the question around language, and Mr. Malone, I don't know what your feedback here is, if in that first paragraph adding, so down in the definition of the policy, it has religion listed there, but do we also need to add language as well, being that it's like a federal category? And then Emily also added additional categories when in your comment, or Ms. Chavez, excuse me, in your comment. And do those also fit the legal definition to be added here?
I actually was gonna talk to Ms. Giovanni about whether it made sense to. I think they ought to be the same. So do we just have it one time? So do we not list it up at, but that's probably not your preference, would be not to have it up front and have it refer to the definition down below. That's more inclusive. Or do we just go ahead and kind of mirror the definition, even though it adds more to the policy? It may be easier, especially given that board members have raised the concern. So I was going to talk to her about that offline.
Thank you. And I think if, when we bring it back maybe to what legally we need to make sure we include in there would be great too. If there's language or legal status or any other things that might need to go in there.
Understood. Thank you for all this discussion. Ms. Byer, did you have anything?
No, I really don't, but I appreciate all the comments that you all have made and all the improvements you made through your comments. I look forward to seeing it in the future.
Thank you. So this was on the Precies for Action. It does not sound like we're ready for action other than some additional research around the language. And so we will look to have it added to the agenda for a second reading. Additional discussion. Thank you. And the next agenda item is from Operations Services, 9A, funding for schools. Mr. Johnson? Mr. Lasser. I know, right? You want to introduce Mr. Johnson? Called your name out.
Anyway, no, very well. Yes, funding for schools. In your packet, you received a précis in regards to the funding for the schools that we would like to put forth to provide schools as we have in the past few years, $20 per enrollment for the 20th day count to ensure that schools that are growing will get the maximum amount of money that they can utilize to provide incentives for students and staff, celebration type things to encourage student performance, as well as reward the staff and the students for all the hard work that they've done over the past year. As Dr. Mabinga mentioned tonight, school districts are looking at Durham Public Schools to see what we're doing right. So we want to make sure that we continue to support our schools in this respect. So tonight, the $20 per student would be about $625,000 that would be going out to the schools. So they can put the money in their local bank, their local checking accounts, so they can utilize the funds in a more expedient way and a more appropriate way to support their staff and students. Also, we included in this document a document that is the guidance for equitable student and staff incentive and rewards was attached to this for your use. In regards to that document, that is something that Dr. Bullock has worked on collaboratively with others to come up with an outline, a guideline for people to be able to use as a resource as they work through their school improvement plans and develop plans for the use of these types of incentive dollars. From that standpoint, it's not up on the PowerPoint, but that was included in your packet for you to be able to see what guidance that we're providing to schools. So we want to bring that to you for action tonight so that we can move forward as soon as we get moving on this school year with all the traditional schools in and provide the $20 per student to the schools.
Just additional comments before board reactions. Schools pretty much, I think we're using the ADM model in an equitable way because there are other schools that they have strong PTA, PTO. Other schools, they don't have anything. So our principals has been very appreciative of being able to get these funds so that they will be able to address student behavior, attendance, and things of that nature. So our boards, our principals are really waiting to see what the decision is going to be tonight. And we've been able to receive feedback about the misuse of the funds. That's the reason why Dr. Stewart was able to trust Dr. Kevin Bullock to work on this policy, not policy, guidance, so that our principal, they will be able to know how to use the fund that you're going to approve tonight. Back to you, Mr. Lusua.
I'm open for comments or discussion.
Ms. Rogers, thank you.
Thank you for this. I'm very appreciative to see this going forward. I am so glad to hear how appreciative our principals are of this additional per pupil funding. I guess my questions stem around, do we have any examples as to what that funding has been used for? Is there anything tangible that that funding was used for that is carrying over into the next year or still available for use? And then in section 4 in incentives and reward ideas, one of the bullet points is excursions and field trips centered on academic engagement and social emotional learning. Are we empowering principals to use excursions and field trips as an incentive and reward as opposed to an academic excursion, academic enhancement?
Thank you for that question. I think at this point, we're just giving them some guidance. We're telling our principals, anytime you get a fund, you have to go to your school improvement team. You look at data, whether it's academic data, attendance, behavior, whatever, and then let these funds be aligned with the strategic plan or the school improvement plan that you have established for your particular school. So we don't have anything specific that's redirecting the school to do other than the guidance for them to be able to use it using an equity lens.
So how do we ensure that schools are making field trips and excursions that are centered on academic engagement and social emotional learning a part of their standard curriculum?
That's the work that's our principal supervisors. They're gonna make sure, they're gonna monitor to make sure that our principals are pretty much in quote unquote compliance with the guidance that we put in place.
Around field trips. So we're not saying you can't go on a field trip because you didn't meet your academic goals.
I have not heard that. So those would be a really good question to be able to ask our principals.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ms. Rogers?
Any specific examples of what the funding has been used for, anything that's tangible that still remains at the schools that's carried over or been held over?
I'm not aware. I'll let Dr. Stewart if you want to jump in, but we can come up with exhaustive list of things that they've been able to buy and purchase or support with these funds.
Anytime, I'd love to hear that.
Thank you.
Any other discussion, board members, comments, questions?
I just want to appreciate the guidance from the Office of Equity and Professional Development. I think over the years, we've seen different students celebrated online. And so this guidance, I think I appreciate the focus on giving questions to ask, also focus on like goals and growth, not just an outcome at the end. So it's a combination of both, which I think is important. We know that all of our students are starting in different places. So to be able to help them monitor their progress towards a goal, meeting that goal and celebrating that growth, I think is really important. Ms. Rogers, I don't have an extensive list, but I know in the past, let me not even say that because I don't know what pot of money principals use to do their celebrations, but I know that many schools celebrate students who are on honor roll, students who met growth. Like I don't know what pots of money people use, so I don't want to say that, but I know that I've seen lots of celebrations for growth for students, whether around benchmarks or the end of the year kind of exams. So I hope that this helps guide those in a really positive direction, that even more students get included because they're meeting their goals and seeing growth. And I think this is just an example of us leading, thinking about equity at the forefront. I do think in the future, I don't know, we have more schools that are starting earlier, and I don't know if we would need to, I know the fiscal year starts in July, but if we would need to approve this in June so that principals who start in July, early August, kind of know what they have available. I'll look to you all for that conversation, but I know that we have people who are already in school. So I want to make sure they have what they need to thrive as well.
And in response to that, we're going to do it based on their 20th day enrollment. So we can roll it out to those schools that have been in since the end of July, because they're going to be coming up on their 20th day very shortly.
Great, thank you. I just want to make sure they have what they need.
But we're doing it on the 20th day enrollment, so we have to wait till we get to that point.
But to the Ms. Armstead points, if we do this in June, by July 1st, the fund will be available for those year-round schools, especially that's we're going to have more starting next year.
Ms. Carter Alton, then Ms. Valladares.
I'm very grateful that we're able to give this funding to our schools and glad to hear that the principals are appreciative. It does seem like a significant amount of funding that could do some really great things for our schools. I similarly was wondering if we're talking about, say we have around 31,000 students enrolled, $20 per student. This is over $600,000, right, that we're dedicating to this, which could be really good. But I'm wondering, while I appreciate the autonomy that we're giving our principals to meet this needs of their specific school, and I think that's really important, are we asking for any kind of reporting for how they use the funds or any kind of tracking for just broad categories so that we know and we can learn from that, understand their needs, know where our money's going? No.
I am not. They're supposed to work in with their school improvement plan. So that would be giving us the guidance that we need for how they're going to utilize those funds. And in the past, we have had the principal supervisors approve those dollars to ensure that they are for the needed expenditures and to ensure that all students and staff are looked at equitably.
Dr. Stewart, did you want to add to that?
Good evening. I was just nodding in support of the comment and the response from Paul LaSure. So one of the things that we will do again that we did last year, this is year 2 of our school improvement plan presentations. Although last year you all approved the 2-year 2023, 2020, 2022, 2024 school improvement plan cycle. This year, we will request all principals coupled with a member of their school improvement team to present their plans again. There is language specific in terms of expectations for them to present their incentive plan. So that is a part of the presentation. They will receive feedback from that from the team, in addition to their principal supervisors being the persons to approve their incentive plan.
Thank you. I knew you had more to add to that. Ms. Carter, anything else?
Yes, a couple of things, but I really appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. Stewart. I love the guidance. I think that's really critical. And I assume this is being shared with all school staff that will play a role in administering the incentives. Because I think it's really important that we're motivating hard work and effort, not punishing kids for things they can't control, like, attendance for really young kids, for example. It's out of their hands largely whether they can get to school or not. And that's an equity issue. And then also rewarding like inputs rather than outputs, like a test score. Or looking at growth instead of performance. I was wondering, do we currently have any kind of limit on the amount that a school's allowed to spend on a reward for a single student? Or has there been any discussion about that so that we could?
We don't. I think we heard some comments where some schools, they were spending 300. That's
Right.
the reason why we came up with this guidance, because we received some feedback from our board on this. So we did not have any specific. That's where the guidance came from.
Dr. Stewart?
Looking
Yeah.
at me, I'm nodding in support of what the superintendent has said. In addition to receiving comments back from the board, we also observed some things as we walked through the schools, and we made notations of what was appropriate and what was not appropriate. Therefore, in collaboration with Dr. Bullock's office, it was important for us to provide guidance because we do not want to limit creativity with the school improvement team, but definitely guidance and a lot of hand holding as it relates to inequities around incentives.
Ms. Valladares was next, and then Ms. Rogers.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that I followed Dr. Stewart. Just because I know that this is, like the work of walking through the schools the way she does, and her team, and taking notes, like as she mentioned. Some of the feedback that we've gotten, I don't know how many of us might have gotten these emails, but there were some concerns definitely about just the I would say the equity guideline considerations for how rewards are not necessarily punishing, but definitely not seeing the effort of kids who are climbing a Mount Everest, for example, who are overcoming obstacles, barriers. And some children got to go to Carowinds, and some families got to enjoy something like that. And I understand like these are incentives that we give. Some schools have given to students, but there was definitely some commentary around, how that plays into what students perceive about like kids who are performing and kids who are struggling, but also trying, and that effort is not really as seen and visible. So I know that this is work that we're going to continue to see about ways that the incentives do follow the guidelines. I really, really want to shout out this work, especially point number 3 about equity considerations to keep in mind when considering award incentives, and just even the questions about, how does this incentive help to address inequities if we have inequities in a school system. So that I'm grateful, Mr. LaSure, that, that you included this also. And also like, who does it benefit? Who does it impact? Who is it benefiting? How does it impact just a general feel. So, I look forward to hearing more, and I know Dr. Stewart is always so busy. Thank you so much for your work, with the schools, and as I continue to listen to, whether it's names on the walls, we've heard from some community members who just talk about like, putting the names on the walls for the honor roll, like that's something that happens in some schools, but ways that we can also shout out, some schools are also shouting out students that are exemplifying, you know, positive behaviors, even in spite of challenges and stuff like that. So I'd like to see a little bit of how this work, point number 3, kind of rolls out. But thank you so much for giving us those numbers, and we're excited that schools actually have some resources by which to celebrate.
I'm sorry to bring this up again, but every time I think about the incentives and the investment on the incentives, I think about the limitations that families and educators and guidelines that admin gives out around teacher appreciation and what we can do for Teacher Appreciation Week and how parents can appreciate educators. Normally it's about a $20 limit. And if we are, especially because we don't want to have tax implications. And I think about all the things that we've been allowing our admin to give as incentives to students can sometimes put them in a compromising situation, given that sometimes they have to share with siblings and other things of that nature. So we don't want it to, or they don't know how to care for an item that's that high end, because they haven't been taught that or haven't had an opportunity to do that. So if that's not something that family is willing to take on, are we willing to really run this back a little bit and make sure that we're implementing dollar limits there on the incentives? Because I don't want to pit educators against students in that educators can get a $20 gift card at Target, but students can get an Xbox. I don't even know what the latest one is, whatever the latest Xbox is. I was gonna say 360. That's not right. Okay. So I just want to make sure that we are giving everybody the same kind of appreciation and letting them know that they're all valued in that way.
Ms. Umstead?
I really appreciate that feedback, Ms. Rogers, and I want to make sure that we don't tie the hands of the people who are coming up with these plans too much as well. I think with the layers of, you have a school improvement team that has students, parents, and staff, then they have to present to Dr. Stewart and her team to get that approval. I think with those layers, we hopefully can, I think Dr. Stewart hears the kind of direction of the board, because I want people to, there's also like a lot of opportunity that happens here, right? When students get to go on field trips or get things that they would have not normally gotten. And so I don't want to tie their hands too tight, but I also think that the guidance should, if you follow it and ask these questions, might limit some of those really big incentives. Because like an Xbox does not help to address inequities for one kid, right? That's one child. Versus if I think about an incentive, I want to address inequities that are around lots of kids, So I think I hear us, but I want us to make sure that we think about the guidance and think about the layers that people have to go through to make sure there's a check and balance on that as well.
But I just want to say thank you. I think we made progress. We've done this probably for the last 4 years without any guidance. We've seen some schools buying those expensive jackets. We say, hey, wait a minute, don't do this. So now they got a guidance. I think they're gonna be improvement, but we gotta keep in mind, as much as we don't want to micromanage those schools, we have to trust those school improvement team, which is inclusive for parents as well, to come up with what is best for the schools. And again, when they come to present to Dr. Stewart team, and they're gonna be more feedback. I think as we're putting this guidance in place, we're gonna see improvement along the way.
Ms. Chavez?
I just want to say, I'll be brief, that I also really appreciate the equity considerations. I think that's really important. And I appreciate what you said, Dr. Stewart, about creativity and supporting that. I want to say, I think what this has the potential to do, and probably has done in the past as well, is to create a positive association between students and school, regardless of their grades and their test scores and all of that. And I think that's what we want, is for kids to feel a positive association with school and with learning, and want to, be part of the school communities that we create. So thank you for this.
Any other discussion? This is on our Crises for Action. You ready? Go ahead.
I would move approval of the funding for schools.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Umstead, second by Ms. Byer for this additional funding of schools. We will do a voice vote. Ms. Byer,
This is Natalie Byer. I vote aye.
Ms. Rogers,
Aye.
Ms. Valladares,
Aye.
Ms. Carter Alton,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Aye.
Ms. Umstead.
Aye.
I have also vote aye. It is approved unanimously. Thank you for your presentation. The
Thank
next
you.
item on the agenda is also ESSER funding update, fiscal year 22-23, quarter 4. Mr. Lesueur.
Good evening once again. As we talk about COVID, we're going into our last year of COVID funding. We need to be mindful that these funds have to be expended or obligated by September of 24. Anything obligated, such as contracts that are in the works, that the work gets done between then, September 24th and January 25th, will be counted as expenditures. But I'm just starting this off this way to let you know that if some of those contracts don't come to fruition in that period after September 24, we do not have access to those dollars. So if a contract was let for La Chase, which was something you looked at today and approved on consent item for $1.9 million, that contract, if all of the pieces did not play out, if there was $100,000 left on that contract, we would not be able to spend that money because it's contract specific when it comes to crossing the September fiscal 24 month. So we have to be conscious of that. So we're going to be monitoring those contracts that we let out between now and the spring to make sure that these are on track to get accomplished by, I prefer to have it all done by September 30th, August, really, because ultimately we want to make sure that we are in a place where we're not scrambling to spend the last few dollars. We want to make sure that they're expended on time. I just wanted to start off with that conversation because we are into a crucial period. This district does a fantastic job of spending down dollars and not letting things revert back to the state or the federal government. There are times when it happens because their contract or their dollars that are tied to students or specific personnel hired to support those students, and those students don't come. The person, it's a contract, the person, a nurse or so on and so forth, doesn't get paid for that, those services, unless the student's in class and being administered the services. Those are the times where we lose dollars to the state. But this district does a great job of making sure that we get it spent down. The federal programs area, under Dr. Danner and Dr. Stewart, they do a fantastic job of making sure that we spend down those dollars on an annual basis when the 27-month period ends for the grants. As we start with the COVID appropriations, as we know, we had 3 rounds basically of funding. The CARES Act, which was given out in May of 2020. Go to the next slide, please. The Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplement Appropriations, CRRSA, enacted in December of 2020. and then the American Recovery Plan and enacted in March of 21. We're at the point now where we're going to be closing out two of those. In September, we closed out the coronavirus release, the CARES Act. September, we'll be closing out the CRISA, which is, as we call it, ESSER 2, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3. And then in 24, we'll be closing out the American Recovery Act, ESSER 3. With that said, we spent the $13 million that we were provided from the CARES Act, ESSER 1. We're spending down quickly the $48.8 million that we received for ESSER 2 that ends September of 23. Back in March 9th meeting, work session, you approved the supplemental funding to be used, this supplemental funding to be used for bonuses in September to ensure that we spend down the ESSER 2 funding. We're on target to spend it down and then use some of the ESSER 3 money to finish up the bonuses. It costs close to $8 million to do the supplemental bonuses. And we have a little over 7 million remaining in ESSER 2 at June 30th. So some of those expenditures have come through and reducing the amount that we have available, but we're going to be spending it all down. I can assure you that, because we're going to overspend it by September 30th. So with that said, we're going to give you an overview of where we started and where we are today from that standpoint. If we could go to the next slide, please. This is just a quick look at the ESSER 1 funding that we received from that standpoint that ended in September of 22. We got the $13.7 million. And you can see based on this chart, we spent down on a consistent basis to get rid of those dollars. A lot of those dollars were for ensuring that we had the computers in the classrooms, our one-to-one initiative, and hotspots. You have the other little programs that we spent out that we talked about in Q2 and 3 from the purpose of ensuring that we were able to get all these spent by September of 22. Next slide, please. This is the big chart. Up at the top are in the green area is the money that we're spending down right now based on the ESSER 2 funding that was released to us. PRC 171 is the big pot of money. As you see up there, $7.9 million that's still remaining balance, third column from the right. That shows that we had a little over $7.9 million remaining at June 30th. Again, that's spending down because we had additional expenditures come in after June 30th for contracts that were let. So we will most definitely spend it down as we pay the ESSER bonuses in September. September 15th is the target date for the bonuses to be paid out. The other pots of money, the areas are working feverishly over the summer. A lot of this is for summer programming with your ESSER Summer Career Accelerator, PRC 177 and 178. Those are programs that still have to spend down some money. And those directors that are responsible for those areas are engaging in contracts and support for the students over this summer. So making sure that we can spend those out by September 30th of 23. The big pot of money in the blue area, we got a lot of money to still be spent. This pot started off at 1097 from that standpoint. $109 million that we received overall. Of that, the 104.7 million was ESSER funding, which is the big pot of money, PRC 181. That we still have $62 million left at June 30th. That continues to dwindle from that standpoint, as we had the summer programs that took place in July that we utilized funding for. So those numbers are coming down from that standpoint, and we will be on target to spend those down by the September of 24 deadline. So overall, we have about $7.3 million, $73 million left, or 46% of the money that we had appropriated to us over those 2-year periods. Next slide, please. And this just shows you where we are. We're in Q4 of 22-23. This gave you a breakdown of the funding that we received and how much we had per pupil back when we started receiving these funds. This is just for information. Next slide, please. In this slide, this really breaks out the academic services, $56 million or 37% of the pot. If you remember, academic services was a little bit more than that when it first started out, but some of the items that you provided in support of additional bonuses, portions of that was taken out of here, as well as the operation areas to support those bonuses to all staff members. To date, you've provided over $4,500 worth of bonuses. You've had 3 rounds. Moving forward, you'll get it up over $6,000 that we've provided to staff across the district and across all areas. A lot of this money is for summer learning. Of this $56 million was being spent on summer learning, as well as temporary positions in the schools for the past 2 years. We're extending it out over the next year for schools, where we'll have about 129 positions, I believe, that we'll be funding at school levels, mental health positions, teaching positions, language positions, a variety of different positions that will be utilized to support the schools as we move forward in this last year to try to reduce learning loss, as well as ensure we're in a better place with our test scores down the road. Gains have been good and we want them to be great. So we're moving forward. We've provided additional curricular resources, the art programs, you had reading programs that you've put in place that we've been able to utilize these dollars for as well, to make sure that we all had the same curriculums going out to the schools, to ensure the students would be able to go from school to school and be able to be in the same place along the way. That's rounds it out for the academic services area. And we'll go to the next slide, please. As we talk about the operational services area, the $52 million, again, that a portion of this was carved out to ensure that we had the bonuses going out to staff during the periods of no significant salary increases. But the majority of this money has been used for facility repairs and improvements, the HVAC systems, making sure that the facilities, air quality, to minimize at the beginning the virus transmissions. Also, the outdoor learning programs that were developed through the implementation of the outdoor learning sites. Educational technology at the time, this was under operational services. We haven't moved it out from underneath that for this purpose. But we were providing the one-to-one laptop initiatives, so we had some technicians that we were providing additional positions for up, I think we had 13 budgeted, but we probably did not fill those positions in their entirety to ensure that there was support for all schools with the one-to-one initiative as well. A lot of enhanced cleaning took place over the past few years to ensure that the cleanliness of the schools were and disinfecting of the schools were appropriate for when we were coming out of the coronavirus COVID times and getting back into school and ensuring that we had appropriate signage in the hallways outside to make sure that we had all our needs. I think what the most important thing that, this district did is really looked at the holistic picture as we moved through the process. And the operations area, of course, had to bring on a lot and also some custodial work and also used during the summer, used staff to ensure that we were able to get the buildings clean. So it wasn't just the custodial personnel, it was others that might have been 10-month employees that wanted some extra work during the summer to ensure that, one, we had clean buildings when we came back in. Next slide, please. And then the other areas, we had staff recruitment and retention, $28 million that we appropriated for that purpose. School level strategies, $13 million. And administrative services, another $1.6 million. And the staff recruitment and retention, again, were funds that we've provided up to this point. And we're in a good place to provide those additional staff bonuses as well as recruitment bonuses for this upcoming year as well. School level, one of the other things in the staff and recruitment is your TA to teach to ensure that that we can bring in our TAs and bring them up to speed and get them the classes they need so that they can enter into our classroom so we can grow our own. That's been a big initiative that we've been working on with the staff recruitment bonuses and retention initiatives. School level strategies, again, these were funds that were provided for tutoring, supplies and materials, curricular materials as well, to provide the schools the needed resources to address learning losses and bring our students' grades up during the testing times. And then there were some other dollars that we spent for the purpose of administrative services. And when we talk about that, we talk about the initiatives for aspiring teachers, as well as some money that we put aside for at the time, COVID tracers, as well as some other support for the agency. So that rounds out the overall allocations and how we set them up to start. And they've adjusted as we've come along. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This chart just gives you a summary of the relief funds by areas to just bring everything back around to where we started and where we are with our remaining balances from the different operational areas within the district. As you can see, we're at the 46% mark with these two sets of funds, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, with about $70 million remaining overall. Next slide, please. This is showing you the summary of positions that we had in the ESSER category for elementary, middle, and high, different types of positions throughout the district to ensure that we had our resources in the schools to assist as we came out of the learning loss. These were the positions that were provided for 2 years. At the end of this, June 30th of this year, some of these positions ceased, but some continued based on school needs. And that was the critical part when we went through the allocations with the principals. They were able to advocate for positions that were necessary. And we looked at those very closely to make sure that it was equitable and that there was a true need based on actual data that was provided to us to ensure utilization of these positions were appropriate. There were 109 positions through the year. We had the majority of those filled, 97 at this point from that standpoint. So, I mean, it's an in and out thing with positions at schools, whether it be us trying to maximize the positions at the schools to ensure that we utilize these dollars and spend these dollars first. Of course, they all have to be, if they're a certified teacher or any type of certified position, they can only be paid out of ESSER if they have their certification and licensing up to date. Next slide, please. And as we came into June 30th, and as you would expect, we would be reducing positions as we went from the 119 that we had FTE equivalents down to the 47. All custodial part-time positions were eliminated at that point in time. Schools we're working on converting part-time positions that we have within the budget to support those individuals that would be that wanted to continue being custodial staff here at the district. We're converting some of those from half-time positions to full-time positions to ensure that we can provide them the benefits that they need to be part of our school district. Next slide, please. And at that point, we're open for discussion.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It definitely had a lot of information, and looking at, we were rounding out using this funding. Appreciate the confidence in getting it spent down and the breakdown from the different categories. I will open the floor for discussion from our board members. From what you shared with us, who would like to begin? I can also keep going. I was just want to say, I really appreciate the way that it really all ties together, from instructional, intentional funding, right? The equity initiatives that are in place, in particular, the school level strategies that we saw. I appreciate the breakdown. And you always show us a chart of where the spending has been, where the funding has been allocated for spending. Definitely from this input and strategies for the 2022-2023 school year, we should see some correlations. We know that it's not a one-to-one input, one thing, you're going to get the output of the other, but that there's a combination of work that has to be done to see growth in our district. But looking at these numbers, and it's unfortunate that it had to be a crisis for us to get this influx of funding, to get the technology needs met, the operation needs met. All these things work together, knowing that our schools are underfunded, but that DPS has done a really good job with the intentionality of spending it. And that's what your report shows to me in the skill level work. I look forward to the growth report from this information and do see some correlation from one to the other with that intentionality when the report comes out to us. The big picture allows for fine tuning at the school level, and that's what you shared with us today. One of the things that I did note on the summary of K-12, the school level strategies had the greatest percentage remaining. I was going back and forth from the different slides. Did you talk about where that is going to be spent? And the assurance, is that where, well, no, I won't even ask where it's from. What was that line item?
So as we start looking at the funding for the 23-24 school year, we're going to be looking at it holistically again to determine what the greatest needs are at this point in time. They had to apply for those school level strategy funds. Many schools did not apply for those because of the fact that your Title I schools had Title I funding, correct? They had to spend that down as well as this down. And to utilize both pots might have been a little bit too much. What we can see from this is that as we revise this plan, some of that money will go into paying bonuses in the upcoming year for tutoring in the schools if they apply for those funds. Again, those are funds that we need to have them apply for. From that standpoint, some of these dollars may be also utilized more for the positions that we're putting into the classrooms this year. Because as our enrollment's been dropping, as we've talked about, and as we've also lost funding from the state, the pressure comes down to local, which we can offset some of these positions in the classrooms based on our loss of students as well.
Thank you for that. And I did see the greatest, or the least amount left in percentage for spending was in HR, recruitment and retention. So good job there, Dr. Lassane and team. But that does lead me to think about this application process and school improvement team planning that you talked about, Dr. Stewart. Will there be enough time to tie what's coming out of the school improvement team plans for getting schools to apply to this funding?
So I'll speak to the fact that next Wednesday, 5 of our schools, our year-round schools, will do their presentations. And part of their school improvement presentation, it includes a request for funding to support whatever needs that they may have. So that is embedded within the process. Also in September, our specialty high schools as well as our traditional schools will present from September the 19th through the 28th. So that is the timeline in which we will have all particular specific requests because they have to request it by September the 30th. That is what is on their plan from us.
Thank you for that. That is it for my questions. Any other board members? Chair Armstead.
Thank y'all for this presentation, and Ms. Lorsour, I'm happy to hear you say we're going to spend all this money and do it early, watching the contracts, because I think we need to make sure we're maximizing the funds. And it's good to hear from our public comment earlier that Durham is kind of ahead in planning, and I think we've done a really good job with this. I feel like a broken record or a Debbie Downer when I ask this question. Often we talk about this funding, but I mean, 2023 is here and 2024 is next year. And I'm looking at all of the positions, especially that are in schools as acceleration teachers and all those different positions, instructional coaches, like we know the impact they have on student learning. And so I think we need to have in this upcoming budget cycle, if any of these positions need to be there, we need to be having that conversation with our county commissioners starting now. And if there are more that need to come for 24, 25, we need to start having that dialogue because these are, I believe, and I'm sure you all will be able to do an assessment further to understand which ones are directly helping impact student learning, but we got to plan for that now in that conversation.
Ms. Chavez and then Ms. Carter Alto.
Thank you. Also, yeah, glad that we're spending these dollars down. And my question is about on slide 10, the different positions that we funded. Can you remind us or Dr. Lassane if how we determined where those positions were based?
Okay, I'm not viewing that, but.
So these positions that are on this slide were the ones that we developed through the allotment plans. And during the 2021 school year, for the 21-22 school year. So we planned on what the needs were gonna be, so we could have them for the 21-22 and 22-23 school year in place.
So they were based on allotments, but did, they also went beyond what we were allotted by the state? So were there schools that got, additional support based on certain criteria?
So part of the allotment process was the review through with our chief of schools. So that's why I was saying Dr. Stewart could speak to the prioritization that occurred in the conversations during the allotment meetings.
So to that point, we tag team the allotment process for this past year. Paul LeSueur, representatives from Human Resources, as well as myself, we met with the principals. They signed up and they had an opportunity to hear their allotment from Paul LeSueur. And then afterwards, they were all asked if they had additional requests. So it was an equitable process. As a result of the request, we had conversation, right? Is this reasonable and necessary? Those were the two main words used, reasonable and necessary, because we wanted to be able to spread the wealth of support for all. And so as a result of that, the majority of them received what they asked for if it was reasonable and necessary, which was above and beyond some of the asks from the previous years.
Thank you. That's really helpful to understand that process better. And I, wonder the same thing as Chair Umstead keeps bringing up, what will happen past September 24. So I wonder how that process will be useful in kind of assessing our needs and desires for the budget going forward. Thank you.
My questions are also about slide 10 and the 109 positions that expired at the end of the 2022-23 school year. And you alluded to this, so I'm curious to know, like, what proportion of these roughly have been extended? Do we know? Just to give me an idea, like, we lost all those positions, but some have been extended, some have been moved into, I think, vacant positions within DPS. Is that correct or no?
Correct. I mean, the intention was not for anybody to lose a job. We have a lot of turnover on an annual basis in all types of positions. And the biggest part that we pushed was that we wanted to put people in positions. It might not be at that school, but at another school where there was a need. We still had the growth. We still had loss of enrollment, which makes it difficult. But again, we're probably putting probably close to 100 positions at this point in time back into the schools. It keeps changing every day. That's the reason why I say about 100.
And at this point, we're still receiving requests. So.
And so one of the factors that's playing in now is we've gone with the child nutrition program. We've gone to CEP. We've gone from 17 schools to 29 schools. And with that, the Title I money gets spread out further, because now you have schools that are at 100% participation because they're now CEP. So we're looking at that as well. Of these, we're looking at 21 positions as of right now, and it's going to continue to grow. So we'll be looking at putting more positions into the schools as their budgets had been reduced, and with the less Title I money going to the schools that normally received it and go into more schools, it's going to put some pressure on the Title I budget as well.
Valladares.
I thank you so much for mentioning CEP, because I did see that, as of 2 months ago from the funds that are expired. I get mentioned school nutrition as well and COVID. But we have to continue to build capacity for kids to access lunch across our Title I schools. Now, because Durham Can has been involved in this and they have kind of held me to task and asked me to give reports back, I just want to make sure that we have that number. So I understand that we were 17 and we talked about, we had 34 Title I schools, right? Is it 34 schools that were designated Title I?
Pretty much when it comes to Title I, all our elementary, their level, and then we use some middle schools as well. and
Schools.
some high schools.
Because that, what I essentially reported back is that pretty much every Title I school, you know, we had applied for those to be included in CEP, so that number went up to, I heard 29 right now, but I was like, my understanding was that there were 34 that should be Title I we'd be applying for.
So we have 5, I believe, that are not Title I schools. In the elementary schools.
Can get you the specific numbers on those, Board Member Olivares. The thing is to remember is the more we increase our Title I schools in the CEP program, the less money we have for that individual school to continue to support teaching positions at the rate that they have been supported at that particular year. So say, for example, if I receive let's say $150,000 this year, if we continue to expand for more CEPs, that's going to be less money. So now I may receive $30,000 of Title I dollars. And if previously I was able to fund 3 teaching positions, at this point now with $30,000, I'm not going to be able to fund a teaching position. So that is one of the drawbacks of going full CEP. It impacts our ability to support teaching positions at Title I schools.
This is definitely going to be just a follow-up conversation, just because the general sentiment around the county is food insecurity. And as many families as we have that, you know, especially with rising costs of living, gentrification, so much that is happening around the area, that it's actually quite an extensive group that is beyond just Durham Can. It's actually touching folks on the county that are advocating for this. But I appreciate Dr. Stewart. I can't see, I have to turn around. I appreciate this. You know, what are some of the constraints that we have? I will definitely report back 29 and then of Title I, and then the 5, I guess, that are not Title I. I'll just follow. I think we'll just do another follow-up conversation. The other thing is that I don't know if you noticed in the media today, there was a report that went out that talked about school nutrition having 14,500. You may know this because this actually came out in Spanish. I've seen it in the Spanish TV where they actually did an interview talking about $14,259 that are pretty much like in lunch monies that needed to be reclaimed because they hadn't been reclaimed. And, you know, it's folks are like starting to notice a little bit more about what funds do we have. Is there, you know, the interview was with Nydia Vargas Casiano, who interviewed, and she's the eligibility from the Office of Eligibility, who gave that interview. And it's just interesting because the community is listening to this. Like, there's some monies in there. What can we do if that money doesn't go back to each person? Can we use some of that money to further some of these further the work of school nutrition, being that some of those funds have already kind of gone past their deadline?
So those funds are still in the child nutrition program, but they're being held aside for those individuals. We reached out to many, but we didn't get responses. Of course, people come and go. So the money's still sitting there. But they tried to track down as many as they could in that regard to put the money out. Let's be reminded that we're at a place where we're going to be spending $350,000 or more dollars on unpaid lunches annually again.
That's the number I needed. Okay, so can you say that number again? $350,000 worth of unpaid lunches. Yeah. That was the reference number I needed. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Lesueur.
We're hoping that CEP will bring that down. Because we'll get more lunches into students' hands. But again, it's still going to be at a cost to the district on an annual basis.
Really good conversation. Ms. Rogers, you're next.
Thank you, Ms. Valladares, for bringing up that conversation that you've been in with Durham Can. I think I mentioned it at the last meeting, or yeah, we were talking about the last meeting. Dr. Stewart, is there any way to get projections for the numbers or values or loss that we could have if a school went fully?
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you.
And one of the other things that I need to add is that we're losing some Title I funding to begin with, right? Wasn't that to the tune of $1 million to $2 million that we're going to be losing in Title I funding?
We lost 2 million for this 23-24 academic year, if I remember correctly. So as a result of that, we needed to make up for it. And so we are utilizing our ESSER dollars to support those staffing positions that have been lost as a result of adding additional schools to CEP.
For that. Any other discussion?
So a couple quick comments here. I think Mr. Lesueur said it really well. I think we're at a point where probably in a week or two, we're gonna look holistically all the fund that we have, academic as well as our operation, to be able to realign our priorities. And again, we have to make sure that we're working with DPI for some flexibility that we're not aware before. We're trying to see if some of those flexibility, when it comes to operation, we used to use a lot of those money for HVAC and all that kind of stuff. But there are other pressing needs with fire marshals and all that kind of stuff. We're trying to see if we can get some flexibility there. So we're going to realign our needs as we're going to try to finish up the last year. So I heard comments about 100 positions that we have moving forward for next year, whether or not those need to be put in the budget. Definitely, we're gonna do assessment. I think usually we start around December, working on the budget and having informal conversation with the board. What's your pleasure, things of that nature. And we're gonna do analysis of the impact of all the positions that we had before. But I just wanted to remind us that 100 position, when it comes to teaching position, I'll say probably about $50,000. Average, when you include benefit, that's about $20,000. I'm looking at about $70,000 per position. So times 100, that's about $7 million just to be able to maintain those positions. So I really want us to be able to be honest to ourselves, because the situation that we're going to face moving forward, once all these funds is gone, all the district, we're going to be facing that, because we've been able to have this luxury of extra money, but we're going to make some tough decisions. Are we going to be able to maintain all 100? Maybe not. Maybe 30, maybe 50. So those will be conversations that we'll be having as we start looking at the budget around December.
Thank you for that input, Dr. Mabanga. And this was on the agenda for discussion. It sounds like that wraps up our discussion. And then that concludes our agenda items for operations. But
Sorry, Miss Lewis, I'm sorry, I texted you and I just texted you late. Can I say about 3 sentences before we move on to the final of this evening? And thank you so much. I wanted to start with just deep appreciation for Paul and your finance team and all of the work that you all have done to do incredible management of these funds. I don't think we gave you extra staff, but we certainly gave you, and the feds and the state gave you lots of extra hoops to jump through. I appreciate you letting us know that you're going to help us figure out which of these positions might be able to stay, which might need to be able to go in the future, and giving us advice and input on that. And we may have to make some tough decisions and say no. And we're going to hear some of these things from schools probably this year, as we already have from some schools. And so we're going to have to help folks understand why we're making these tough decisions. Enrollment going up would be how Durham could come together and help us bridge and bring back counselors to EKPO, for instance, right? There are ways that our community can join us in this growing together work as we move forward and help us have people. The other thing we talked about, Mr. Lesueur, and you said real clearly to staff that these funds have to be spent by September of 2024, or they will revert. And we know we're not going to let that happen, but especially on the operational side, I know you really needed that by June 30th. You really let Mr. Johnson know that. And that's the date that's in my head. The end of June 2024, right, is when we've got to have these projects moving well ahead to make sure we don't lose these funds. So thank you so much.
And thank you for your comments, Ms. Byer. That is a perfect segue for a point of privilege as we are concluding with operations, is to introduce our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Larry Johnson has joined us. Dr. Mabenga, do you want to introduce or have him introduce himself? Welcome.
First of all, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thank you to the board and Dr. Mabenga for giving me this opportunity. I've been here almost a month. I had the opportunity to visit almost 50 schools within that month and talk to principals and do what I call walk and talk, just get feedback from them on how we can help them move forward. That conversation has been very positive. We have some things that we're putting in place, like Ms. Byer just mentioned about some of the money that we have to spend, and we're going to get to that point. We're going to have conversations with Dr. Danner and Mr. Lesueur and see what we can do to keep moving forward. I appreciate this opportunity. I think we have a great team. I would be remiss without mentioning some folks that have gotten us started at the beginning of the year. That's our custodians and our bus drivers, the schools that have already started. When I go into the schools and I see the floors and I see how clean our schools are, we have a great team. We have a great team, and we can only get better. So I appreciate this opportunity and look forward to getting to know you guys better. And anything you need, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you so much and welcome to the team. And that was for discussion. Is there anything else on the agenda?
Not from.
Summary or follow-up?
Using the board docs list, item 3A, Dr. Mabenga requested that he work with Ms. Rogers and another board member to meet with several of Dr. Mabenga's staff to develop a final edited version for the board's consideration at the September work session of the resolution regarding Black and Brown student achievement. Under item 4A, this policy regarding telework is to be brought back on August 24th at the board meeting with clarity around the out of county or out of country, out of state protections that might be needed. Item 4B, the policy on 1710, there was a request to bring this back on August 24th, 2023 as well, with clarity around the protected class language to determine whether they should track each other or move them around. So just wordsmith kind of the protected class language. There was some conversation from a board member regarding some concern or wanting some additional information around the fact that Title IX coordinators and other discrimination coordinators were listed in the policies and easily accessible to families and community members, but that same may not be true for counselors and social workers and other people in the school buildings. There was a statement that there needed to be an investigation, or not investigation, but to take a look into the need to share with staff members the option to have a person of their same gender as the contact person for Title IX. And so just wanted to make sure that look into what needed to be done if there were a female that was not comfortable talking with Mr. Coweek, or perhaps a male that wasn't comfortable talking to Miss Beckett. Just making sure that we put in there somewhere that it's clear to those people that that is an option to have someone of their same gender present if their gender is not the same as the expressed gender of Miss Beckett or Mr. Coweek. Item 5A, there was a request that there be some clarity provided regarding the use of field trips for education by principals versus the use of field trips perhaps as incentives. So there was a request for some additional information on that. There was also a request that when asking for the ADM incentive funding, that be brought to the board in June so that those funds can be ready on July 1 for the start of year-round schools. Item 5B, there was a statement that the growth report on those items is anticipated and that there would like to start a dialogue around the positions that may be lost around ESSER fund, that are lost with the expiration of ESSER funding. And lastly, under 5B, there was several requests that the additional information or a presentation be provided regarding CEP schools versus Title IX funding, and a request for a projection on what that may look like financially. Those are all the follow-up items that I have. What did I say? Title I, it's in my blood. Thank you, I apologize, Title I. And those are all the items I have, Dr. Mabanga.
Thank you. Those conclude our items on the agenda. Can I get a motion for closed session?
I move that we go into closed session, sorry,
Oh, no.
based on the reasons stated in the agenda,
Second.
on the agenda.
Been moved by Ms. Umstead, second by Ms. Valladares. We'll do a voice vote. Ms. Byer,
This is Natalie Byer. I vote aye.
Ms. Rogers,
Aye.
Ms. Valladares,
Aye.
Ms. Carter Alton, Ms. Umstead,
Aye.
and I also vote aye. It passes unit six.
Yep.
We're now in closed session. We are now back in open session. Dr. Mabenga.
Board members, I'm here to seek your approval for the personnel report as discussed at the closed session.
I move approval of the personnel report dated August 10th, 2023.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Umstead, second by Ms. Chavez. All in favor, we can do a all vote. Aye, as Ms. Byers not with us. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
The motion carries 5-1. With that, the session, the meeting is adjourned.